Okay, thank you. It works. My name is Wojciech. I'm with Polish Building Research Institute. I'm also a visiting scholar at Imperial College London. And everyone in Poland was already pretty much done with my ranting about visibility and smoke, and they told me, go share it with these guys, they will love it. So here I am. I had a point to understand how visibility modeling works in CFD, and it seems to be a little more complicated than I expected it to be, and I would love to share my thoughts with you about this. So what's visibility in smoke? Do we use it? Of course, every one of us uses it. It's one of the key tenability criteria we investigate in our numerical studies. Every one of us investigates visibility, and everyone takes decisions based on if visibility criterion was met or not met. Also, maintaining a given value of visibility in smoke is often considered the goal of our modeling. We design our systems to provide a given value of this particular parameter. And one thing that is very nice about using visibility as a parameter to describe tenability is that people who are not fire engineers, they can understand what we're talking to them. If you say someone, I can see for 10 meters, he can imagine that. If you tell someone, I have smoke mass density of 0.1 gram per cubic meter, then he doesn't understand it at all. But is that simple? Well, visibility in smoke theory is not really well laid out in the textbooks, in the guidebooks. It's actually quite difficult to go through the theory if you want to. There are also gaps in theory. Some of the knowledge we gather as fire safety engineers during the years of discoveries was lost by incorporating them into factors. K factor, C factor, you know it. One is 3, the second is 8. It's something that we use every day. But by applying these universal values, we have lost their true meaning and how can they be used to make better buildings. And also, I've found it that visibility as a criterion is very difficult to define. For myself, who really, I did my best to duck into it, it's very difficult to define what would be my expected value of visibility in smoke. And somehow people who write the law, they are very easy at it, just 10 meters, it's okay. And it's kind of discomfort for me. But I can agree that today's level of modeling, today's criteria we use, today's solutions, they are safe. I mean, they are very safe. We are far behind the safety margin with using what we're using today. So technically, we could just leave it as it is and be happy about it. But, well, the future isn't coming, and there's no way to avoid it. We are on the day when virtual reality modeling is going to become a thing. It will become a thing. Either you like it or not, but it will become a thing. And you will see calculations in which people will present you with drawings showing that something is visible and something is not. And to do that in virtual reality modeling, well, that's one hell of a modeling. It's really difficult, and if we don't get our mathematical models straight today, in future, we will be working at completely false data that we don't really understand. And one more thing, it's really easy to incorporate the visibility in law. It's really difficult to explain to the HAJ why I took this decision and not a different one. For example, we often use K factor of 8 for light emitting signs in our design, and sometimes we have to battle why this value and not 3. It's very difficult to explain to HAJ because they are taught to use just value 3 because it's more conservative. But what's the meaning? What's the meaning of all of this? So as I take you to this journey of visibility modeling, I'll open up with a very rough statement. Does this model really work? Well, sounds good, doesn't work. That's the best expert on it I can find on the internet. So let's look into what we really do when we model visibility. If you plot up this beautiful color map of visibility in a room, what does this picture really say? Is this visibility? Is this how far I will see in this room, standing in a given place? Well, not really. This picture is just a collection of values of the visibility in each particular cell, in each particular finite element in the model. And the solution is given for each of them separately from the surrounding elements. It's like each individual element in this model is a complete room. And in each of these rooms, in each of these elements, it's like if the whole room was filled with the smoke of this density in this point, you would see in this room this particular obstacle for a given distance. And it's even more complex than that, because you would see that particular object at given contrast ratio in given luminosity values of the room. So you don't really calculate visibility in the room. No, you just transfer mass fraction into something understandable by layman. Now, how do we do that? First, to have some smoke in a model, you have to release it. So we burn stuff. We burn stuff for a living. That's what fire engineers do. User has tremendous effect on how much smoke is emitted into the room. It comes from a very simple calculation. When you calculate the amount of mass burned times the soot yield of the material, and each of these parameters is chosen by the user, and change in each of these parameters will tremendously affect the resulting visibility. And since I have a whole paper on that with Gabriel Vin from GVVA in Spain, I will not go too far on this. I will show you some results at the end of the presentation, but the user factor is huge on visibility. Now, as we release the smoke, how does the model know what amount of smoke is added? Because it's CFD, it works on fluxes, on velocities, on flows. So we release our soot because the mass is conserved, and because there's a transport model in our solver. The soot is transported along with the flows of air through all of your domain, and in each numerical cell, you know the values of temperature, density, volume of the cell, and how much the mass fraction of smoke, which eventually leads to knowing the mass of smoke in any given cell. So that's pretty much what we solve. That's all we solve in CFD. The rest is just a submodel. But knowing amount of smoke in a particular cell is not yet the visibility. For the same reason why you cannot see this sign on this picture. There has to be a certain contrast ratio between the sign or object and the background for a person to be able to see it. And now, do we really model that? That's a good question. Because when you try to figure it out, well, the easiest way to explain it to anyone, how do we do that, is by under-panic norm logic. Phase 1, you release mass into your domain. Phase 2, phase 3, you get visibility. That's what we do every day. The deeper you go into phase 2, the more difficult it becomes. So let me take you to the beginning of it. At the start, the first beautiful studies that were done on visibility of smoke were done in Japan by a gentleman named Jin. And as he described in his paper, the visibility is, of course, a factor of the contrast ratio of the signs. It also depends on the size of the sign. And, well, from this, thankfully he written this in English as well. From this you can get the visibility factor based on the parameters of the brightness of your sign, the luminance of your background, the contrast ratio. And the contrast ratio is actually very interesting. The contrast ratio is the value that says what's the difference between object and background that you can see. The values he reports are from 0.1 to 0.5, 500% scattered. And we just pick 0.2 as a value that we use every day. You don't know that you do that, but you do that. So there's a mathematical model, but do we use it? No, we don't use it. It's too difficult to be used. There's another model from the 90s, from Polish professor Sichta, which was published in Fire Technology, when he took the genes theory even deeper and included scattering coefficients, some other parameters that depend on the parameters of smoke, and laid it down. How can you calculate visibility of an object? But, well, no, we don't use it either. So what do we use? Well, smart men figured out that modeling this is really hell. So if you can't model, you just measure. What was done is they built, that's the Gene's experiment, that's Yamada's experiment. They built a room, they put some smoke into it, they put a person, do you see that sign? Yes. Okay, do you see the sign? No. This is the value when you can see the sign. So now, what we have to do is just to relate this value, which Japanese person in the 70s saw, to our modern modeling. How do you do that? Well, they've invented the K factor, which we all love. You all are learned in your professional education that those shall use the factor value 3. Not 4 on the 2, the factor shall be 3, and 3 shall be counted upon. And it's not really the thing. Actually, it's very difficult actually, Jean, in his 70s paper, he shows a beautiful correlation between the contrast ratio and k-factor as a linear function. It's absolutely beautiful. But we somehow lost the ability to use this knowledge in our engineering, and we focus on two particular values that are currently in use. And this k value is also a factor of the size of the sign, because it's a factor of size of the contrast ratio. And contrast ratio depends on the angle of your looking. So bigger sign means bigger k value. And from newer studies by Yamada, it's a person who now writes the new chapter in the SFP handbook about visibility. From his studies, they reported much higher k values than Jean. They reported up to 22, while we consistently keep using 3 because this shall be the number to count upon. How to make it work then? This value observed in experiment is the same value you put in your computer. Well, you have to know one more factor. This one more factor is specific extinction coefficient. And it's very difficult to manage that parameter, because if you're talking fire engineering in large rooms, large experiments, you can measure applied obscuration. But if you want to measure that, that's very precise laboratory apparatus to be used, developed in 80s by Mulholland in NIST. And in many different units in the world, they were doing research on what is the specific extinction coefficient of the smoke. And they come up with a scattered data. Mulholland gathered it all up into one piece of work, which is actually fantastic to read. And we came up with the universal factor of this, which is 8.6, with a range of 1.14. That's actually the default value that's used in FDS. Well, it seems that this value is reasonable and it works out with experiment, but it's also a factor of the meter used, the apparatus used to measure it. Because another gentleman from NIST, named Widman, has figured out the correlation between the wavelength of the light of the laser used to measure this with the value of this parameter. And yeah, the theory was great until this moment. Now it's broken, because we didn't really know what kind of meter Jean used in the 70s. I don't know Japanese good enough to figure it out. I don't know it at all, actually. So yeah, for now we base all of our science on 1k value from 70s from experiments, and this factor that should bring one theory to another, which I personally am not completely certain of. So to find the second step of our visibility, well, we use to go between 1 to 3. We use the k values determined through past experimental projects when people were looking through a predefined layer of smoke onto signs and notified if they see them or not. This is exactly what we do today in our CFD. One very interesting thing that occurs to you if you analyze all of this is if you try to go with the timeline of discovery, because the gene research was in early 70s. The first paper on this is from 1970, which is, well, far ago. It was before even zone models were developed. So his theory was actually developed in times when we were thinking of one zone models, of one uniform layers. It was not developed for the purpose that 50 years later people will do CFD for skyscrapers with it. No, it was developed for single zone models. It's actually like 15 years before we started thinking ACID-ERCID criteria, which were introduced in 1984 by the paper of Leonard Cooper. It's 20 years before George Mulholland invented his apparatus to measure the extinction coefficient, which is necessary to incorporate this theory into reality. And it's like 20 years before the first fire CFDs were really done. I mean, imagine how long ago it was. It was approximately the time when Liverpool last time won the Premier League. It's so long ago. Our common tool that we use, the fire dynamics simulator, was created between the millennia. So all of this we learned from Jean's research. was just, okay, we can spread this theory to double zone model, and okay, we can maybe spread this to small CFD. And now we just use this as an universal tool. So, one more thing. And where did the 10-meter criteria come from? That's also interesting, because it also comes from far long time ago, and I was not really able to find any source data on that. Why do we use this particular value of 10? I just know where this value of unfamiliar and familiar comes, and this comes from experiments where people were shocked by electricity in a smoke-filled room in Japan as well. And familiar ones were the employees of the Building Research Institute in Japan, in Tsukuba, and unfamiliar were their wives. No, but it's really, I'm not against this theory. It's the best experiments done upon the time, and if they submitted this paper to Fire Technology Today or Fire Safety Journal, it would be accepted because they're fantastic. It's just we lost the ability to track how this was discovered, and just put so much faith that it's good that we don't really think about it. So yeah, do we base our design on rough estimation? Sadly, yes. It's not visibility that you are modeling. You are just translating the mass density of smoke into something that other people can understand. So I could end on that, but I promise that I will not only rant, but give you some ideas on how to make it better. So 5 things how we can make it better. First, you have to understand what you are presenting with this beautiful color map of visibility in smoke, because the way how you present the scale should reflect the physicality of the value that you're showing. I mean, if you look at this beautiful color map of visibility in smoke in this plot range from 20 to 0, you think, okay, like this is a lot of smoke, this is medium amount of smoke, and this is no smoke at all. What you would thinking with intuition about this color map. But actually, it's a power law. It's not that. It's a power law because the mass, the only variable is in the denominator, and that means that actually the difference between 10 meters and 20 meters visibility, and on this scale you have the grams per cubic meter. This is all clamped into a very small range of smoke values in your model. So you are essentially resolving all of this spectrum because you can precisely tell how much grams per cubic meter of smoke you have in your model. But you present your results only related to very narrow field of this range, which means that you essentially may miss areas which have some smoke, but they don't have enough smoke to fit into the scale. That's kind of a risk. And how to deal with that? In my institute, for a very long time, we're consistently using mass density of smoke to present results related to the smoke instead of visibility. It's just another value that's linear with the mass of smoke, but it presents better the areas where small smoke scattering is. It better shows the flows. It allows to understand the smoke spread in a more intuitive way. It also has a trap because this is not a power law scale. So actually the jump from here to here is tremendously huge. You have to be aware of that. But this way of showing results has proven for us to be very, very robust. Now the second thing that we're not doing, and what we could have been doing, is to promote better evacuation signage through our CFD analysis. Because now we investigate the visibility of evacuation sign, but what kind of a sign? Just a normal sign. And there is a huge difference if you compare this sign to this sign. This one's obviously better, but we don't have any tools to show to our stakeholders that, okay, your project is not so good as it could be, but we can solve it by installing better signage. You can tell it based on your experience, but you have no way to prove it. Maybe that would be very nice to do it. And there are some papers on it, one from NIST from 90s, one from Japan, where they were investigating these effects of larger evacuation signs on visibility in smoke, which give very interesting feedback that using bigger signs can be proven to be more effective than using smaller signs. Now, third thing, when you I really hate the visibility criteria for the fact it is a binary criteria. I'm often asked, was this criteria breached? Yes or no? It's complex three-dimensional flow. It's not yes or no answer. I mean, if you take if you have your plot level little below or little above smoke layer interface height, you will have two completely different values. And if your smoke layer falls below a given height, is this a problem with visibility? No, it's a problem with your smoke layer height design. And you should focus on why the smoke layer height is here. Where is your natural pressure plane? What caused this smoke to fall? Not how can I make this visibility from 4 meters to 17? That's completely a different question. You should focus on the physics, on the behavior of your smoke layer, not on visibility. Then you will have these areas of the room. I mean, we go to court and the judge asks, was the 10-meter visibility conserved in your domain? And I have this result, which is perfectly good car park in which smoke falls at one place. And I cannot say, yes, it was okay, because I had my 10 meters visibility breached at one point. Why? Because there was a wall that caused the local smoke recirculation, and it was even in a very nice layer, but it locally felt. The value of visibility at that point is completely irrelevant to my study. What's interesting is how smoke got there, and if I can do anything to remove it from there or prevent it going there. You also will have some areas in your buildings where you supply air into your room, and there's absolutely no way you can prevent the smoke mixing with air. Well, you can make super small velocities of air or extremely